Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. In a congratulatory phone call to Greece's Prime Minister on his recent re-election, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that he hopes a new era in relations will benefit both countries. The longtime NATO allies have been uneasy neighbors, with both seeing tensions rise over the past 2 years. But that animosity was largely put aside back in February. Let's take a look back at how it all came about. And now to discuss Turkiye-Greece ties, joining me now from Istanbul is Tarik Oguzlu. He is a professor at Aydin University. And from Ankara, Dimitris Tsarouhas. He is a senior research fellow at the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Dimitris, now that both Turkey and Greece have settled who their leaders and parliament members will be for the foreseeable future, so what's next for both countries' relations?
It's good to be with you again, Ayşe. Thank you for having me in the program. As you said, it's important that there is clarity now. The election cycle is over. The issues related to that election period have been cleared up. And very importantly, the leaders of both countries, both Prime Minister Mitsotakis and President Erdogan, have been able to appoint their new cabinets pretty quickly. They have a clear mandate of moving forward. And as they have made clear, their respective foreign ministers are people of their utmost trust, with whom they will be able to coordinate policy fully and comprehensively. So therefore, the preconditions for the normalization of bilateral relations between Greece and Turkey, which were set during the devastating earthquakes that hit Turkey and Syria, will now continue and possibly intensify. The first test for this will be in the Vilnius summit of NATO coming up in a couple of weeks.
So, Tarik, why do you think both leaders entered their respective elections with a less hostile tone towards each other during their election campaigns?
I think it's very clear. We have to make sense of how Turkey and Greece have developed a kind of determination to find a much better relationship between each other in recent years. There are some bilateral dynamics pushing this outcome and also some structural regional dynamics leading to the same outcome. Turkey and Greece now are in a similar situation that they had in the late 1980s when the earthquakes caused a kind of great degree of sympathy between the two countries. That proves a very important factor on the part of Greece in particular. And we also know that Turkey's Europeanization and EU-led transformation, I think, is very much in Greece's national interest, in particular at a time when we are fast moving to a kind of second Cold War in which Turkey turning its face away from Europe and the United States or coming much closer to Russia and China axis might somehow increase the geopolitical tension in the region, and this is not going to be in Greece's national interest. We know it. Turkey has been quite busy in recent years recovering the losses of earthquakes and economic crisis, and Greece's humanitarian support eased the tension in this particular relationship. We have to note these developments in particular, and we also know that Turkey is improving its relations with the countries in the wider Middle East in recent years has somehow made it quite difficult for Greece to have create a kind of anti-Turkish coalition in the region.
Yes.
As of today, Turkey is not as isolated as it used to be in the recent past. And also, we are now in the middle of a summer season, and neither Greece nor Turkey wants potential tourists cancel their vacations plans in the middle of the geopolitical crisis in the region. And also, in particular, I need to underline that the tension over the East Med crisis in recent years somehow has lessened because the key Western actors somehow withdrew their support from this project. And this has also pushed the two countries to come somehow closer to each other.
So, Dimitri, Turkey has often put the blame on the Greek side for derailing relations. Mitsotakis' trip to the United States last year is one example. So, what would the Greek side needed to maintain this positive path in Turkey's views?
It seems to me that the message that Athens has been sending across the Aegean for quite some time now has been very stable. It hasn't really changed in comparison to the Washington trip that the Greek premier made, and afterwards. The message has always been the same, which is that improving bilateral ties will be to the benefit of both sides. But largely this will depend on whether Turkey wishes to engage in a normalization process. It seems to me that over the last few months, there has been a determination made in Turkey that normalizing relations with Greece, normalizing relations with other regional powers is in the country's interest. I happen to agree with that assessment. I think the possibility of improving relations has been here for quite some time. And I don't think that there is any sort of contradiction here in terms of improving relations with Greece for Turkey and doing the same with other Middle Eastern countries as well. Mm-hmm. It's a so-called win-win scenario, so to speak.
So, Tarik, Greece's foreign minister also said one of his priorities is to reach an agreement to reunify the ethnically divided island of Cyprus. Is there a suitable environment for a settlement, given that the South Cyprus's new president, who has served as the country's foreign minister between 2018 and 2022, and vowed to unite the divided island and also become the president of all Cypriots?
I don't think that we are in the middle of a kind of propitious environment in such a way to make sure that Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots would sit around the same table and finalize the details of a kind of everlasting solution, because the position of the parties have already been very much well entrenched, and it is increasingly unlikely for both of them to revert from their original positions and to come to a kind of modus vivendi. Because we already know that in recent years, Turkish Cypriot administration and Turkish government in particular have made it very clear that there is only one precondition for an everlasting settlement, which is that the international community and the Greek Cypriot administration in particular should recognize the fact that there are two independent states on the islands. If they don't recognize this, so it's going to be extremely difficult. We have to underline it very quickly. But can I also add another point which seems to have moved Greece and Turkey much closer to each other in recent years? Geopolitical developments after the war in Ukraine should be taken into consideration in order to understand now why we are talking about a kind of rapprochement between Greece and Turkey. Because we all know that improving relations between these two countries might somehow pave the way for improving relations between the West and Turkey as well. So this is quite important, in particular, given the worsening great power competition and in Turkey's swing state identity. And key Western actors, US and EU members, do not want Turkey and Greece having a kind of crisis in this particular region, as they are increasingly in need of somehow Turkey's cooperation against Russia, securing Sweden's accession to NATO, and dealing with the humanitarian crisis in the Mediterranean region.
So, speaking of the impacts of energy prices, Dimitris, how would an expanded energy cooperation between Greece, Southern Cyprus, and Israel impact relations? Could this be another source of friction between the sides?
It's a very good point that you mentioned, Aisha, because remember that the cooperation between Cyprus, Greece, and Israel has been sometimes perceived as contradictory to the role that Turkey could potentially play. As I mentioned in my answer to your question earlier, I see that there is a win-win scenario here, which Turkey is finally coming a bit closer to. So now that there is a restoration of diplomatic ties with Israel, with Egypt, and hopefully Turkey will normalize relations with all of its neighbors, the possibility of Turkey playing a role in the Eastern Mediterranean security and energy cooperation framework goes up. Of course, Cyprus, that you mentioned earlier, will be a thorn in the back of any sort of settlement. I don't think I agree with Tarik that we're not there. The possibility of accepting a bi-zonal, bi-communal federation in Cyprus is far away from where we are at the moment. There doesn't seem to be enough political momentum. I think we need to take this step by step. I mentioned earlier that Vilnius is going to be very important. We will need to figure out where do the two leaderships stand in terms of moving towards a more comprehensive framework of normalizing relations. And it seems to me that starting with confidence-building measures, expanding on them, and then hopefully following on from Prime Minister Mitsotakis' statement that maybe there is going to be a determination in Turkey that Ankara will join Athens in moving to The Hague in terms of settling the bilateral issue of the continental shelf and the exclusive economic zone.
So we're speaking about this downsized East Med pipeline, Tarik, between Greece, Southern Cyprus and Israel, and talking about whether this would cause any friction between the sides. What are your thoughts on that? And could Israel and Egypt, both of which Ankara has normalized ties with, play a facilitating role between the two nations?
I think it is not that much easier to say that external countries might play a kind of magical role in pushing Greece and Turkey to find solutions to their problems. But we have to make it very clear that the changing dynamics of regional politics in the region, in the Eastern Mediterranean region, in recent months, has very much facilitated this Turkish-Greek cooperation and rapprochement process. Why this is the case? Because Turkey has improved its relations with Israel in Egypt and also come closer to other countries in the region which have adopted a kind of skeptical approach towards Turkey's foreign policy orientation. But just because of the fact that Turkey has improved its relations with those countries, it has become quite difficult for Greece to somehow secure their quote-unquote cooperation against Turkey. This is a very much important structural factor. We have to underline it. Another structural factor I have already mentioned, but let me underline once again, the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is very much important here. If we hadn't experienced the war in Ukraine over the last 1.5 years, Turkey and Greece would not have been in a position as of today to talk to each other and to explore the possibility of any kind of good relationship or mending fences between each other. So external factors are very much fundamental in this particular sense.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.